Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Search with Candour. My name is Jack Chambers Ward and this is another solo news episode. I'm going to give you all of the important SEO news from over the last 4 or 5 weeks or so, all throughout April of 2026, and then coming through a little bit into May as well, since I'm recording this on the 8th of May before you're going to see this on the 11th, before it goes live on the Monday. And basically, I'm going to go through, I believe it is 6 stories of the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think are the most important things we've covered on the Core Updates newsletter. You can go and get that at coreupdates.com if you don't already. That delivers usually 8 to 10 of the most important SEO news items of the week, plus Mark's unsolicited SEO tips, now solicited direct to your inbox, and every episode of the Search with Candour podcast as well, delivered straight to your inbox every single Monday morning. And I like to do these little episodes, basically giving you a summary and a recap, a little bit of discussion, my thoughts and opinions on what some of the more interesting and important pieces of news have been over the last month or so, pretty much. I'm going to go through in chronological order, so this is not order of importance or anything like that, but we'll go through and talk about some stuff that's happened in April, shall we? Let's get into it. Let's talk about this first one, which is something I think a lot of us have been predicting for a little while now. A closer integration to what we're expecting for the future of Google. This is from Brodie Clark. A huge shout out to Brodie, by the way. Does brilliant work when it comes to things that are changing on the SERPs, things that are changing with Google, things that are being shifted around and any sort of updates. He has a brilliant tracker. I will link in the show notes and description if you do want to go and follow Brodie and his SERP updates, as he calls them. Basically, this is talking about how Google is testing AI mode experience in the All tab of search. So this is integrating AI mode into the central main search function of Google, rather than having it being its own little tab by itself. This is more, like I said, more closely aligning with what a lot of us, including myself, have been predicting for a little while, that AI mode will become the primary search function over the next year to 18 months probably. And this is kind of about as close as we've seen so far as the AI mode as default, which is what Brodie says here. And this is a post from Brodie showing this example here. I'll play this little video here for you if you are watching. This basically has a little show more type thing here. Almost pops up like an AI overview, pretty much. So you've got a searching on the All tab at the top left here. He's not pressed the AI mode button. You're searching on All, but instead of an AI overview, you get an AI mode pop-up. Kind of weird, an interesting way to integrate it, and kind of what I've been predicting and what many other people in the industry have been predicting for a little while as well. Is this the future of Google search? We don't know, but I think it is a pretty significant, potentially a look forward, pretty significant change as to what we've seen from AI overviews evolving, for one better phrase, into AI mode integrated directly into the SERPs. So nothing confirmed yet. This is from the 1st of April. I'll show you that little thing. It does say 1st of April there, but it's not an April Fool's, don't worry. But I think this is an interesting thing to talk about because so many of us are predicting that AI mode is going to become this central part of Google search, right? I think it's quite likely that it will evolve out of AI overviews. AI overviews will be eventually removed entirely. In the same way that AI overviews have essentially replaced featured snippets, AI mode could essentially take over the AI overview slot at the top of the SERP there and become more of an integrated thing into the main search. And also, I know Brodie mentions here a dive deeper with AI mode button. So that then opens up the full AI mode experience. So kind of what I think Mark and I were talking about it a little while ago. And I was speaking to Steve Payne from Systrix about this a little while ago as well. How AI mode might be kind of integrated into search in a way where you can choose between the two. So Google will essentially funnel you towards traditional search if it believes your query is more, is better served essentially by traditional search methods, or it will funnel you towards AI mode where it thinks that would be a better way to serve you the answers to your queries. And I think that's potential. I don't know if Google will want to be classifying queries that broadly and that sort of in such a binary way, because I think they'll always give the user the option to swap to the other choice as well. But I can certainly see something like that happening, potentially like this, how it's laid out, where you have AI mode as kind of the almost AI overview at the top of the page, and then you've got the traditional search and the classic 10 blue links after that. I think that could be an interesting way of integrating it, and this could certainly be something I can imagine Google doing in the future. Next up, another one from Brodie Clark, because Brodie's always doing great work. This is a little bit of a weird one from Google Search Console, to be honest. They have been misreporting, it's based on a glitch that has been misreporting impressions since the 13th of May 2025. And you might be thinking, but Jack, you're recording this on the 8th of May. How can it be from the 13th of May? I said 2025. It's from last year. It's almost a year ago. And by the time you're hearing this, it will be almost exactly a year ago. So this is quite a significant thing where a few people were reporting that a lot of their impressions data was kind of off. And again, I know Brodie and a few other SEOs had spoken about this, and seems to be not quite doubling, but quite a significant increase in a lot of impressions. So you may see a drop in impressions. And here's a little example here. Google confirmed on the 3rd of April, a logging error is preventing Search Console from accurately reporting impressions from the 13th of May 2025. This issue will be resolved over the next few weeks. As a result, you may notice a decrease in impressions in Search Console performance reports. Clicks and other metrics were not affected by the error, and this issue affected data logging only. So it's not actually affecting your visibility or anything like that. It is more broadly, more specifically affecting the way it's reported in Search Console rather than the actual visibility of your website itself. So just something to bear in mind, or something to bear in mind. I haven't seen a confirmation that it has been fixed, despite the fact they said this will be resolved in a few weeks, and that was reported over a month ago on the 4th of April. But something to be aware of, something to think about. If you do see any significant shifts in your impressions anytime soon, that might be the resolution of that error that Google reported a few weeks ago. Speaking of Google, this is more AI mode fun, and we'll get into some restaurant booking, agentic experiences. So they've already talked about a few agentic things that it can do. Obviously a huge discussion with like e-commerce and certain partners. I know Walmart has talked about it. I know Ticketmaster and Etsy have also been part of that partnerships program where they've been testing agentic checkouts. This is interesting because this is restaurant bookings, so more like a local SEO kind of thing. You can, in the words of Google here from their official post, describe what you're looking for, how many people, what time you want to eat, what kind of food you want, and AI mode will search across multiple platforms and websites to find real-time availability and tailored options for you. Simply tap to complete your booking through one of our partners. So obviously it's always through one of Google's partners because that's how agentic stuff is going to have to work. And we'll get onto some interesting agentic stuff in a moment as well. But yeah, this is interesting. It's expanding outside of the US for the first time, and it has been a thing for a little while now. I think maybe a month, a few weeks or so. And now, as of 10th of April, is now expanding out to a lot of other English-speaking countries, as well as Hong Kong, India, Singapore, South Africa, of course the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada as well. So there's a nice little interface here they show. I'll do another, show the video here on screen if you are watching on YouTube. So this is basically, they go through and ask, I'm looking for a reservation in Little Havana next Saturday night for 5 people. Somewhere fun with, somewhere fun with local Cuban food and live music. And AI mode does its little thing, and it gives several different options and gives you available times and stuff like that. I believe OpenTable and a few of the other big book reservation booking things allow you to book through, and you literally click through. It all stays on the Google interface, and you go through and you click reserve here. You can add any sort of special requests or anything like that. It pulls through your Google information, so your Gmail, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you book it there and then on the Google interface. It's quite a nice frictionless experience from what I can see. And And there's got a few people here being impressed by the agentic capabilities. This seems like a pretty, I want to say innocent, but pretty harmless version of what we're seeing with a lot of agentic stuff. Booking and finding restaurants can be a pain. I have used that for similar kind of things in the past. Members of my family have various different dietary requirements and things like that. So if I'm going out for meals with my family, we'll have to cater to this intolerance or this allergy or this diet or whatever. We're a family of vegetarians as well, so that's a whole other layer there as well. And it's a thing that I can imagine being used more readily than e-commerce stuff, personally. That might say more about me. That might be saying more about my use of the internet and the things that I find annoying. But booking local stuff and just confirming appointments and stuff, I can totally see agentic AI agents already being used for that kind of process rather than an e-commerce side of things. I'm still hesitant about the e-commerce side of things when it comes to agents, to be honest. But we now have more AI mode. I know, sorry, it's constantly AI mode. A new way to explore the web with AI mode in Chrome. And this is basically split screen viewing. And if you've done this by accident, which is what I did and how I discovered it, it freaked me out. But it is actually kind of interesting. And it's currently on AI mode on Chrome, AI mode on Chrome on desktop. And again, a lovely little video here from Google that will show us how it all works. So they'll go through and show us basically how this video. I'm looking for a Ninja coffee machine, but I live in a small studio apartment, so counter space is tight. Which models will be best for me? And it goes through. Okay, it's doing its little search, lovely. Pops up, and obviously you get links and stuff in your AI mode. And you can then, as it's about to show, open side by side. So you get a second browser window in the same tab, essentially. And it's a side-by-side view. And you can continue asking questions about the thing in the other tab. Things like, how easy is it to clean? How big is it? How new is it? And all that kind of stuff. They use a different example here from Formula One drivers. How do they train for their races? And does the pit crew need to do any kind of training? And it shows like some information here from AI mode. And then, let's expand that out. Click that and it opens a separate little side view. It's interesting. I found it a bit more annoying because I was trying to like close tabs and try and work out how that works. I was sort of just frustratingly clicking around to try to make it work. But you can also use it to search for your recent tabs. You can, like, as I say here, you can mix and match file types. So like open a PDF in one and then continue with AI mode and a similar kind of thing. As someone who often has a few dozen tabs open at any given moment and is really into sort of grouping tabs and things like that, I don't know how useful this actually is for me. I don't really care about having things within individual tabs because I can have so many tabs open at once anyway. I don't know. I've actually had some issues with this recently. I had too many tabs open, and specifically Google Docs was really, really slow and really laggy for me. So I wonder if this would be better in terms of, processing and things like that. Would this provide a speedier experience than having a million tabs open? But I don't know if this actually improves any of that sort of thing. I'm not sure if this does actually. I'll show the last example here as well. You're studying for a statistics midterm and you bring in context from open tabs with your class notes, lecture slides, and academic papers and ask for more examples. Let's have a look. So this is kind of a homework kind of example, a study example here. And you'll go through, you can look at this PDF, look at this Google Doc, give me some examples, review this. I'm struggling to understand the difference here, and it will review them and then open it up in a separate tab. This almost feels more like a lot of what people use Notebook LM for, to summarize and review and compare different docs and the more like researchy side of things. This looks kind of useful, but I would also just use it in different tabs. I will often have sort of like, half a screen of a browser and then half a screen of a browser kind of thing. maybe this is easier than that. I'm still not convinced this is actually more straightforward and easier than that. But I do like being able to ask the questions of the thing as you're looking at the thing. So you're having that kind of chat AI LLM experience on the left-hand side, where the actual document itself is on the right-hand side. That's quite cool, particularly if you're doing research and things like that. But I'm not convinced this is actually easier than just having multiple tabs open. So yeah, a cool, interesting feature. And I think interesting for SEOs as well, because there's a real question of how much attention, how much of the user's attention do you get if your website is open on half a screen rather than a full screen and they're still interacting with the other website. Do you know what I mean? Rather than actually, oh, somebody's really reading my content. We've got a lot of users visiting our website to read our content or buy our products. Actually, they're spending all of their time asking the AI mode about your content and about your products instead. That feels like a less engaged audience to me. Maybe that says more about me as a bit of a traditionalist who actually still reads long form articles. I was speaking to my girlfriend about this the other day, having a conversation about how people keep saying, nobody reads 20-minute articles anymore. And we were both like, yeah, we do. We do. I read like pretty in-depth breakdowns of industry stuff and technical stuff quite a lot, quite regularly. And I know my girlfriend does as well. It's a real kind of interesting thing about like how much attention are you getting from your audience? How engaged are they in your content? And if your content and your product, your website is only half of the page, while they're still interacting with the other half of the page via AI mode, how much less likely are they to convert or to subscribe or whatever it is that your conversion is? I don't know. I'd be interested to find out. I'd be interested. It feels like, again, similar to what we were saying so much with AI mode just now, with it being more integrated into the main search feature. It's Google's stickiness. They want to keep you in that ecosystem. They don't want you clicking off to other websites, despite what they say. Sundar Pichai said like, oh no, we drive more traffic to the web than anyone else. Yeah, of course you do. You're Google. But the fact that it's trying to keep you in the Google interface rather than you disappearing off and doing your own thing, kind of a classic way of retaining people within your system, within your ecosystem. So potentially not a positive thing overall for what we do as SEOs, but an interesting thing for users to experiment with. And yeah, you can go and test this out right now. Like I said, this is pretty much available. I believe it's available globally. Let me just check. Oh no, sorry, it's available in the US. And you can even do other stuff, image creation and use Canva and the canvases things that they do as well in the new menu that opens up on the side as well. So you could do multiple tasks in AI mode at the same time in the same tab as well. And yeah, that is available now in the US. I had to play around with it via a VPN basically. And yeah, didn't mean to trigger it. And then I did. And I was like, I was doing some VPN stuff for US audiences for client work the other day. And yeah, accidentally triggered this. So keep an eye out for that side-by-side, in-tab side-by-side view that's coming up soon. Something else we talked about a little while ago, something tying into Notebook LM I just mentioned actually, which is how a lot of people were creating the AI-generated podcasts, where you can basically give it a document or a group of documents and say, oh, look, please summarize this thing in a conversation. And you get these two incredibly American sounding hosts, one male, one female, discussing the topic for you and kind of breaking it down. If you process things better through hearing them than you do through reading them, or to do both, that's a totally valid way of doing it. What is interesting is Google have talked about audio overviews. So this is, instead of AI overviews, you get an audio version of your search, and it will basically be like, summarize this thing for me. And yes, it is the same hosts. It's the same male, female. Well, hi, hello there, like really American sounding podcast people. And this was tested a little while ago with opt-in via Search Labs about a year ago, as of course, Barry from Search Engine Roundtable, Barry Schwartz, is saying here. And now 2 different people have experienced it and reported it outside of Search Labs and not being opted in. So there's some screenshots, some examples here. Of course, I'll put links for all these articles in the show notes here as well. And then, of course, Brody, once again, reporting that you can see and hear the audio overviews on the SERPs. And this is really kind of interesting stuff to summarize a SERP rather than actually clicking on anything. Again, does that reduce clicks? Does that reduce traffic to external websites? Is this a way for Google to keep you in the ecosystem? Yes, probably. If in doubt, assume that Google wants to keep you in their platform as much as possible. And this is actually something I talked about on last week's episode, which was the live podcast from Brighton. If you haven't already checked that out, I talked about how much these huge tech companies, especially a lot of the companies behind all of the LLMs we're using at the moment, want to keep you on their ecosystem. They want to keep you on the platform as much as possible, so you're reliant on it more than ever, and you are less likely to deviate from them, more likely to make them more money through ads, all that kind of stuff. We know how this stuff works, right, folks? So yeah, I think it's interesting. I hate the sound of their voices. As an audio nerd, as a podcaster for 15 plus years, I can't stand it personally. I know some people find it very useful. I know we do the SEO pattern podcast here, which Mark does through Notebook LM. If you find it useful, if you find it interesting, more power to you. It's not my thing personally, but yeah, I prefer writing things down to learn stuff properly. Back to some agentic stuff now. It's all Google agents and AI mode this week. Sorry, welcome to SEO in 2026, I guess. This is really interesting. If there's anything you want to read from this week's episode, this is probably the thing I would recommend. A few of the other bits are like, updates of, Google's testing this. This is live right now, is really interesting. And I think he's particularly interesting because, as it says on screen here, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, Google I/O is coming up in a couple of weeks on the 19th and 20th of May. So we could be having very big conversations about the fallout of that. And this is Google's official guide to building agent-friendly websites. I know this is something Mark has been talking about. A few of our developers have also been talking about here at Candor. Building agent-friendly websites is really interesting, especially if we think the future of search is agentic, which a lot of very powerful, very important people think it is. And I think a lot of SEOs are talking about it and thinking about it in this way. A lot of us talk about it. What are we actually doing about it, right? I think that's a really interesting conversation to have, because I think a lot of people talk about it. We're all talking about, AI search. The phrase that was going around at Brighton SEO last week was like, the landscape of search has changed. And I know when I spoke there last year, there was feedback from the events organizers saying like, everybody keeps introducing every one of their talks with, the landscape of search has changed. SEO is changed. SEO is dead. We all had these similar kind of intros, right? We're all talking about that. This is actually actionable stuff you can do to improve your website for the future of search. That is why I think this is the most important. This is the must read from this week. What I found particularly interesting is a quick little summary here of, while I guess it's like, we talk so much about being designed for humans to use. Now we're talking about websites being designed for robots to use. And I'm reminded of an episode of the podcast I did many moons ago with Maddie French talking about how Right for Humans and Robots was Maddie's book. And we went into this whole discussion about how it's relevant still for writing for humans. You still need to be aware of the crawlability of your site, the way robots are using your site. What I think is the highlight here, there's 3 points here I really want to shout out and point out. The section here, which is how agents view your site. And Google points out, agents can view your website in 3 primary ways. Screenshots, we'll get onto that in a moment, raw HTML, and the accessibility tree. So, with screenshots, Agents take a snapshot of the rendered page and use vision models to identify the elements. Based on the screenshot, agents can recognize that a search bar at the top right is a global search, while the box in the middle is likely a form field. Visual cues can be helpful as agents use color, size, and proximity to determine importance. A big delete button will likely be interpreted with more caution than a small help link, for example. However, analyzing screenshots can be slow and expensive in terms of the use of token, making it better as a backup when the structure is confusing. So, the visual structure of your website and your page, and especially your navigation, is more important than ever, basically. We kind of knew, that's important, but literally, if you took a screenshot of a website, go and take your website now or a client's website, take a screenshot of that, and imagine you are putting that screenshot and turning it into a piece of paper, or creating it in the real world for it and bringing it into the real world. Would you be able to recognize all of the features and functions of your website? Would you be able to go through and say, yes, that's the main nav, that's the search bar, that's this, without any labels, without clicking or anything? I think that's a really interesting thing, and something not enough of us do when it comes to looking at our own websites and our clients' websites. The other thing here, of course, surprise, surprise, HTML is key. I'll read the little snippet here from Google, but I think this is the most obvious one because the websites have been HTML for a very long time. The agent analyzes the DOM and reads the HTML. It understands how elements are nested to the logical hierarchy of the DOM tree, attributes like IDs and classes that identify and define structure, and raw data strings that form the site's informational backbone. So, information architecture, incredibly important still. Don't forget about that. We were talking about that with our developers and talking about when we were building the Search Knowledge website the other day, funnily enough. This helps the agent understand the relationship between elements. If a buy now button is inside a product container, the agent will assume that the button belongs to that specific product. Yes, the locations, the size, the location of your buttons, the context matters for this kind of thing, right? You need to be aware of what you're essentially communicating with the layout and visuals of your website. And last, but certainly not least, the accessibility tree. And I'll put a link for their extra little accessibility tree. God, I can't say it. The accessibility tree is a browser native API that distills the DOM into what's most important: roles, names, and states of interactive elements. It's the page's semantic summary used by assistive technology. So essentially this is the thing that you would experience if you use something like a screen reader. If you're going through, I highly recommend this, by the way. If you've never used a screen reader that visually impaired users would use to experience a website, go and do that, because it will blow your mind, hopefully, how that reader interprets things on a website. It goes through and lists navigational elements from left to right. It then lists, and because I've obviously inexperienced with a screen reader, it listed it very slowly and I got very frustrated. Having spoken to a visually impaired SEO, someone in SEO who is visually impaired, who uses screen readers regularly, they use them unbelievably quickly because that is their primary way of interacting with websites. It's natural, it's native to them. It's so much faster than what I was attempting to do, because I'm obviously an idiot when it comes to this sort of stuff. It was blasting through all the navigation stuff, and they were just navigating, for want of a better phrase, at the same speed that I would navigate as a visual user. It's really interesting, and basically this accessibility tree is the thing that the screen readers are reading to understand how your website works. And the agent kind of works in the same way. So it carries on. For an AI agent, it functions as a high fidelity map that ignores the visual noise of the CSS to focus on pure utility. By interpreting this tree, an agent can learn the functional intent of toggles, sliders, and input fields. I think that's really interesting. It makes accessibility a core and a hugely important part of your information architecture, the structure of your website, the function of your website, which it already should be, by the way. We've done episodes on that in the past. That is a hugely important part. I feel like a lot of the industry is catching up quite nicely. But yeah, Go and read this in a bit more detail. I think those are 3 things: screenshots, HTML, and accessibility tree. Particularly interesting to understand how agents read and understand and use your website. So go and check those out. Like I said, that'll be the most important thing, I think. So that's the must read from this week. Go and read that and enjoy that in its full. Last but not least, friend of the show, who I keep trying to get on the podcast. I actually hung out with Natalia in Brighton very briefly. Natalia's awesome. She's spoken at Search Norwich. She's spoken at Brighton SEO. She's doing amazing work with a lot of China SEO and international SEO. It was one of my favorite talks I've ever seen was how to use Google Search Console for international SEO at the International Search Summit. That was a couple of years ago now. Natalia's one of my favorite speakers. She's absolutely brilliant. I will definitely have Natalia on a future episode. Don't worry. She's fascinating and very, very smart. So this was an update. Natalia noticed Gemini in Chrome is now rolling out worldwide. What does this mean? Here's a lovely little screenshot. It means that Chrome is adding a little Ask Gemini button at the top right of the screen here. Yeah, that's kind of terrifying, right? And Natalia continues here. So yes, this will be huge for Gemini's adoption and will be hugely impact Google's market share in the AI race. Interesting. I think we'll get onto that in a moment. I agree, but we'll get onto it. Gemini has already been asserting its position by experiencing a steady growth over the last few months while other LLMs plateaued. According to the latest similar web data, in January 2026, Gemini surpassed 21% worldwide LLM traffic share. The Ask Gemini Chrome appearance means even more users are going to experiment with Gemini, potentially including those who haven't used any generative AI yet. I predict an exponential growth. Yeah, like I said, I'm pretty aligned with Natalia on this. I think what we're seeing, even from a business perspective, and this is something I was listening to a podcast the other day about the growth of LLMs, and actually it came up in a Brighton SEO talk as well. The nature of how badly OpenAI are doing at the moment, how the different LLMs are trying to carve out their own little niches because they're all battling for the same kind of thing. You've got people like Claude, which is very much leaning towards the more technical side of things. Code with Claude has become such a huge part of what Anthropic is doing with their side of things. They seem to have found their little niche, right? You've also got ChatGPT from OpenAI. Perplexity, I think, has its uses. A lot of search-focused people use Perplexity. That's the preferred LLM of a lot of my colleagues here. OpenAI is the big question. ChatGPT is trying to be jack of all trades, master of none. I know the full phrase is better than master of none, but I'm Jack. I'm going to rephrase it. I'm going to use the wrong version of that quote. Because ChatGPT has not found its niche and it's doing things like adding advertising, I can't remember what they called it, but they had like a code red announcement internally at OpenAI a couple of weeks ago where they're worried about how quickly Google has caught up with them and how quickly Gemini is kind of overtaking them. Because Google is they're the big dog in this situation, right? I can't remember who it was who was saying it, but like Google have money to burn here. Like they can outlast everyone. Anthropic will not survive losing a bunch of money. OpenAI would not survive. Perplexity would not survive losing a bunch of money. Google have so much money and such a larger, they're so much bigger than everyone else basically. Their development teams, their research and development teams, their product teams, their capital, revenue, straight up. He's so much bigger than everyone else is. They can do whatever they like, basically, and they will survive. And it's little things like this. I think Natalia is absolutely spot on here. Integrating Gemini into more of their products. So if you're using Gmail, you're using Google Maps, you're using Chrome, all of this kind of stuff is part of that Google ecosystem, and you are fully integrated into that. If you're using those products, again, it comes around to things like search intelligence. Oh, we're going to personalize everything. You use Gmail, you use Google Maps, you use Google Photos. We're going to personalize your search experience. We're going to integrate Gemini into your browsing experience, whether you like it or not. This is exactly as Natalia says here. I think this is the really important part. potentially including those who haven't used generative AI yet. Not everyone is like you and me working in this industry are fully aware of how the battles between LLMs, the AI growth. They don't hear this phrase day in, day out, week, any SEO podcast you listen to talking constantly about AI, right? It's unavoidable for us in this industry. Speak to people like my parents. I always bring up my parents on the show because they are so technologically removed from all of this stuff. They don't fully understand what I do for a job. But it's this whole thing of, yeah, there are plenty of people who are not using LLMs. How do we get to those people? And I think it's stuff like this, where just, for want of a better phrase, innocent browsing users of Chrome are just hanging out doing stuff like, what's that? And then suddenly it's integrated. Suddenly they realize, oh, now I'm using more of this button and not even realizing it's generative AI. That kind of thing is really important, really impactful, and something not enough of us are talking about. So I think Natalia is right. I think a lot of what we're seeing in the industry is this kind of shift. And I think Google is going to be the one to outlast the rest of these guys, right? I know, again, my girlfriend was talking about switching. A lot of people have been switching from ChatGPT to Claude and all this kind of stuff. It's been a big shift. I say a big shift. It's like a few people in the grand scheme of things, right? When it comes to talking about these huge companies, Google is bigger. It's as simple as that. Google is so big. As I often do, as I did on last week's episode, I keep using analogies from the games industry. This is the equivalent of, we've seen a lot of issues with Microsoft, and specifically Xbox. There's been a lot of shifts. The heads of the studios, the CEO, all this kind of stuff. The CEO of Xbox Game Studios, Phil Spencer, was fired a little while ago now, bringing on Asha Sharma to bring like a new vision. She was former the head of AI at Xbox or Microsoft, I think, as well. Anyway, my point is, you got the three big companies, arguably, in the gaming sphere, which is Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. They're the three console makers, right? Microsoft. Notice I said Microsoft and not Xbox, because you could say PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox. PlayStation, not big. Sony, pretty big. Nintendo, pretty big. That's their gaming division is their whole thing, but they're pretty big. Xbox, no, not hugely big. Microsoft, one of the biggest companies in the world. Microsoft can afford to burn money to outlast competition. I think the same is true with Google here. They can afford to make mistakes, they can afford to experiment, they can afford to take their time and basically bully everyone else out of this space. I don't know if OpenAI will be able to recover. I don't really care. I don't like most of what people like Sam Altman stand for when it comes to this sort of thing. I'm not going to get political, but I think his vision of the future of the web is not one I'm looking forward to. I'm not saying that Google's vision is much better, but we may not have a choice. It may be, survival of the biggest rather than the survival of the fittest necessarily. Anyway, no more doom and gloom from me. I'll put links for all of those news stories in the show notes. You want to go and check all of them out, read them in a bit more detail. Please do let me know what you think of these news topics. Get involved in the comments. We've had quite a few comments coming in over the last few episodes, which I really, really love. A bit of interaction, a bit of conversation with you guys. I always appreciate that. So comment down below. Please like the video, hit subscribe and all that kind of stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, you can rate us. You can follow the podcast so you never miss an episode when they get published every single Monday. And like I said at the top of the show, go to coreupdates.com and subscribe to the newsletter that Mark and I write every single week. It gets published every single Monday just before you start work, so you can start your work day. Usually around sort of like 10 or 11 a.m. to be honest. You can start your work week at least with all of the latest SEO news and knowledge that you need to impress your bosses and have that interesting, oh yeah, I saw this interesting thing when it comes to internal meetings and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll put links for everything in the show notes and video description down below. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate, especially you guys who have been saying how much you enjoy these little news updates and solo episodes. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much. I will see you next week. I've got a couple of returning guests coming up over the next couple of weeks. and some really, really cool topics and ideas and new guests coming up over the next few weeks as well. And before I disappear, if you're in Manchester in a couple of weeks for Hive MCR on the 21st and 22nd of May, I will be there. I know Mark is going to Athens SEO around that same sort of time, 21st, 22nd as well. So if you're going to be at Athens SEO or you're going to be at Hive MCR, come over, say hello, say hi, come and hang out, say hello. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be around. Obviously, we've got Search Norwich XL coming up in September as well, and plenty of other things coming up in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.